Hey, so today's tutorial is all going to be about how to create a basic mix with your tracks. Sometimes when you start off producing, you might know your way around a studio and you might be able to put a recording together because you know what mic should be on what instruments, or you might be able to create 3-4 minute tracks at home. But when it comes to the mixing stage, maybe there's a few gaps in your knowledge. Maybe you know that you need compressors on your tracks, but you don't know exactly what a compressor does or how to put it in your little chain of effects. Or you know that you need to use reverb, but you don't know how to set it up on a bus. And this little short series of videos is designed to take you through that process from start to finish. And hopefully by the end of it, you can see what a basic mix looks like, and that it's actually not as complicated as you probably think it is when you first start mixing, because everybody has to start somewhere. Even the best mixing and mastering engineers in the world, there was the first time that they ever opened up a piece of music making software, the first time they ever plugged a microphone in, recorded something, and then had to get to the mixing stage. So everybody starts somewhere, and if this is you, then watch these videos because I'm going to take you through from start to finish. The track we're going to be using in order to go through these techniques is a version of Roxanne. And I teach music and music technology in an FE college to 16 to 18 year olds, and this is one of the tracks that some of our students recorded in the studio a few years back. Students that we get can range from they might have just been starting to play instruments through to getting professional gigs by the time they leave us. And I have to say, this is actually a pretty decent recording, This is better than what I was recording when I was 16, 17 years old. So I'm going to show you how to do a rough mix with this. Before we start, I just want to go through a few housekeeping rules because I just plucked this straight out of the studio with all the labeling and where all the tracks are, just to show you some of the things that you might find when you come to mix a project, especially if it's not your own. So a couple of things. These channels here, these guitars. So we've got guitar, there's 3 channels, there's bass, there's lead vocals, backing vocals, and harmony vocals, and there's some drums at the top. These guitars, if you've never seen this before, this is a way of recording different takes and sticking them together in Logic. So if you just click that little arrow, you can see that there's 2 different takes there that they've kind of managed to piece together, and this one there's another 2 takes that they've managed to get together. I'm just going to take their word for it that this is the best possible take, and if you are doing these takes, it's good to get it sorted in the recording process, so when it gets to the mixing stage, you're not worrying about which take was which. So just explaining why that's there. The other one, in case you've not seen it, the kit up the top is stacked together. So if you just click this little arrow here, you can see all of the kit here. So they've got the kick, they've got tom mics, snare mics, and their overheads. Just in order to sort things out a little bit, I like to do this, and I suggest you do it too, is just tidy up recording session a little bit before you get into the mixing stage. So the drums, I like to have my drums from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to start off with my kick as the first channel, then I'll be looking to have my snare underneath, and then my snare on top, my small tom, the floor tom. Now you've got your overheads here, which they've actually labelled hats crash and rides crash. And there's 2 ways of setting up your overheads. You can set up your overheads to be mixing it from the position of if you sat down as a drummer, in which case your hats are going to be on the left and your ride cymbal is going to be on the right. Or you can mix it from the point of view of an audience member, which is what I'm going to do, which is you're going to have your hats. If you're looking at the drummer performing, the hats are going to be on the right hand side, and your crash is going to be on the left there, and then I'll just swap these around so it goes left right. So that's all that sorted. So the first stage of mixing, like what should you do? You just open a project, you're ready to do a mix. The first thing that you should really do is just have a listen to your track. So don't put any effects on it straight away. Just have a listen to what you've got in your hands. In terms of this track, we're going to be listening for what's the musicianship like, what's the timings like, what are the raw recordings like on this. Do we need to be doing a lot of effort trying to get this stuff ready, or is it really easy to just mix straight away? And you're going to find when you're making tracks and recording tracks that the better quality recordings you make, the easier the mixing stage is. You can get the best band in the world in the studio, and if you're using the wrong mics and you're not recording in the right way, then it's going to sound a bit of a mess, really. And it's going to be really hard to get a good quality recording produced. So here we are. I'm just going to press play. The only thing I've done so far is just taken down the bass and the vocals just a little bit, just to balance it out, just for listening back. So we're just going to have a listen, see what it's like, and see what we've got to work with. So as the starting position, that's pretty cool. When I was 16 and 17, I wasn't producing recordings this good. There's a few little rough bits that we might need to iron out a little bit. The guitars are really well played, but the actual sound is a little bit tinny. The bass is well played, and it's certainly not just sticking to root notes or anything. The vocal sounds very musical and well performed, and the drums sound pretty cool as well. Let's just have a little blast of the chorus just to show you what that sounds like. Yeah, to be honest, the whole thing just sounds pretty competent. The only thing I was just going to show you guys that's important to do just before we start is just have a look at your master, your faders in here before we get around to actually putting effects on things. This master fader has been down there. I think it's because if we get to the chorus, if we have a little look at it, it might clip with all the tracks together. Let's just have a look. Yeah, it wasn't clipping there, but there's a chance it went to minus 0.4. So there's a chance that this might start to clip if we don't do anything about some of these faders here. If it does start to clip and you see anything red, just turn it down in your mix. You don't want anything going into the red or clipping in your mix, because it's going to squash your signal. It might add digital distortion in there. It's not going to sound great. Just a little trick. If you've produced a really high quality mix and you're really happy with it, obviously we've not touched any of these faders yet, but what you can do is you can draw a box around the entire group of faders here, and you can just take them down, and what it'll do is it'll move them down relative to one another, so it'll keep your balance of your instruments, but it'll just take down this volume going to your output here, because you want to make sure that this output is not clipping. If this is clipping, take these down. You can always just take down your output volume a little bit here just to make sure, and you know you've got a really clean mix going on. The other thing that I was just going to mention before we move on to the second part of this video, which is preparing each of these individual channels here, is that we've got a bass here. Let's just have a listen to the bass on its own. And you might have been able to work out already that that's a de-eyed bass, and the reason we know it's de-eyed is because there's no spill from anything. This obviously sounds like it's kind of got that musicality that you only get from playing in a track all at the same time. It feels like the musicians are bouncing off each other, which means that the bass was probably recorded at the same time, and because there's no drums in there or anybody else in the background on the channel, it probably means that they've de-eyed this, and what that's enabled them to do is get a really clean bass on its own here. And it's also quite a flat signal, which is what you get from DIs, that kind of sound. So the only thing I'm going to do with this, just to prepare it for the next stage, is I'm just going to stick an amp modeler. And if you guys don't know what amp modelers are, there's usually plugins in most DAWs that emulate a real amp with a real mic in front of it. And as soon as this bass has gone directly into the computer and been recorded, we can put an amp model on here. In Logic, there's 3 things in the amps and pedals section. There's a pedal board, which if you're not seen, it looks like this, and you can just drag random pedals like a guitarist would have. Secondly, there's the amp designer. Just a word of warning, just make sure if you shove in amp modelers on anything on your tracks, just make sure that you're just make sure that you're not using the guitar amp for putting your bass or anything. Make sure you're using the bass settings, because I've seen some students try and put basses through guitar amps and it doesn't sound amazing. But let's have a look down here, bass amp designer, and this is going to be a bit of a mantra of these videos, but if you don't know what all of this stuff does, you don't need to really worry that much at this stage. Obviously, the more you mix and the more you learn and the more you produce projects, the better your knowledge is going to get. But at the start, I did not know what every single parameter on every single effect that I was using did. And I learned along the way. If you're not a bass player and say all of this is a bit new to you, you don't know exactly what all of it does, or the idea of choosing different amps, or choosing different cabinets and speaker sizes. And the other thing you can do is in Logic is you can actually move the microphone around, so you can get it closer to the center of the cone, you can get it far away on the edge or anywhere in between, and you can also choose different microphones. If that is slightly overwhelming to you, which I completely understand, then presets are your friend. Somebody who is very talented has been paid a lot of money to produce some really nice presets in these. And if when you're starting your mixing and mastering career, you're leaning a little bit on presets because you're trying to upgrade your knowledge as you go, it's real no great shame. So I was mucking around earlier, and actually this one, Classic Comp, sounds pretty nice for the bass. Let's just have a listen. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. I mean, there's a few, the DI'd bass, there's a few bits that are kind of like humming a little bit, but there's nothing I can do about some of it because it was done in the studio. The only thing I'd say about this is you can change any of the settings you like. This compressor part of it, I'm just going to turn it off because we're actually going to put a compressor on the channel itself. So I didn't want it too over compressed. So I'm just going to turn that part off. And it's just worth bearing in mind that if any of your amp modelers or anything like that have compressors on it and you're adding more compressors later, then you can get slightly overproduced, slightly over-compressed signals on the go. So apart from that, that's basically where we're going to start in this next video. So the first bit is literally just what the project looks like. And the only thing just to mention as well is that some of these channels here, this was recorded quite quietly, you can see. So that might be a problem in the mixing stage, we don't know. There might be a little bit of background hum more than there is. Usually if stuff's recorded at a quieter volume, it tends to have more of a hum and a background noise than other channels, whereas these are a lot louder. Although having looked at these, I possibly think that they've normalized these, which is something you can do afterwards. It basically maximizes your signal if you recorded it quite quietly. But this is where we're at, and we're ready to start loading in plugins. So follow the link to the next video. See you there.